Good morning, everyone. It's my great privilege to welcome you to the 16th Carnegie International Nonproliferation Conference and to welcome our C-SPAN audience as well. We are more than 800 strong this year, but more important to us, and I hope to you, coming from 46 countries, representing just about every state, with a few key exceptions, whose leadership matters for our concerns for nonproliferation and disarmament, either in a positive or negative sense. When we sat down at Carnegie about 8 months ago to think about the theme for this session, we were struck by two sets of conflicting trends. One quite depressing, threatening, signs of cracks in the nuclear order, spreading threats to the stability and the sustainability of the regime. And on the other hand, some signs of hope and of reason for optimism, of a commitment by many states in the world to rebuild and strengthen the regime. And so we came up with the nice alliterative but also accurate title for this session, Build or Break. And we think we are at such a moment when there are two paths open ahead, and which one will be taken depends on a lot of policy decisions that are in the offing. We try very hard to be prescient, but we could not have imagined that in the 24 hours before this meeting we would see clear signs of both these two trends. A North Korean ballistic missile test on the one hand, another sign of breakage, undertaken in the face of a chorus of international pleas and threats not to do it. And on the other hand, President Obama's ringing call for a major commitment to rebuilding. But there are other things to think about as well, to remember, in addition to North Korea's confusing but certainly not optimistic set of decisions. We have Iran continuing to enrich uranium and, importantly, continuing to defy the UN Security Council, and no signs from the UN Security Council that it intends to press for compliance with its own legally binding decisions. We have seen for years now U.S.-Russian relations deteriorating to the worst situation since the Cold War, with the arms control regime in particular at best suspended, at worst in some respects unraveling, with unilateral abrogations and tit-for-tat threats. We see China building up its heretofore small nuclear arsenal, both quantitatively and qualitatively. We see India and Pakistan expanding their stockpiles of nuclear weapons material. There are reasons for concern that states in Northeast Asia and the Middle East may move to hedge their nuclear bet. And there are other signs that you know well that the nuclear order could break down. But there are also now some encouraging signs. Excuse me. We will hear later this morning how President Obama intends to move both with respect to nonproliferation and disarmament. The U.S.-Russian joint statement that was released last week commits the two countries aggressively to resume arms control diplomacy to reduce their nuclear arsenals. I'm very proud to say that my admired colleague, Rose Gottemuller, the former director of the Carnegie Moscow Center, was confirmed in the wee hours of Friday morning last week by the Senate to lead this effort. She's the right person in the right place at the right time. We have had at Carnegie ideas about how this renovation and rebuilding should proceed. The central theme was put forward in 2005, and we still see it as the central idea for what needs to happen, and that was the phrase universal compliance, which we set out in a book by that title. The argument here, or the idea here, was that a rules-based regime faced with selective compliance could not possibly be sustained. And therefore we wrote that the advantaged minority, the nuclear weapon states, would have to ensure that the majority sees it as beneficial and fair, and that the only way to achieve this was to insist on universal compliance with equal attention to the obligations that nuclear states have taken on themselves. Many of the policy recommendations in that report will be part of the global debate in the coming years. Many are not ideas unique to Carnegie, of course, and many were the product of collaboration with colleagues in this room. Today we are releasing another important study, Abolishing Nuclear Weapons, a Debate, by George Berkovitz and James Acton. It contains the IISS study that was released last September, plus 17 critiques of that study written by leading experts from 13 countries. The book is available on the table here. The entire book is also available on our website for free download. Because this is going to have to be a global process, the idea was to lay out in some painstaking detail what it would take to create a world free of nuclear weapons, how states would have to set about doing it, what verification would be required, what enforcement measures would be needed and have to be overcome, the changes in the way the nuclear industry would be managed, and so forth. Because there is also no official forum where substantive work on disarmament is done, we hoped that this book, and do hope, will jumpstart the process. We are also very mindful in designing this year's conference that the so-called third pillar of the nuclear order, the use of peaceful nuclear energy and its relationship to nonproliferation, is often neglected. The conference program, therefore, reflects our determination to correct this, to integrate all three sets of interests that will have to be met, namely those of the nuclear industry and the use of nuclear power, those of the developing countries and the non-nuclear weapon states, and those of global security, in order to successfully renovate and strengthen the nuclear order. On this point of the nuclear industry, we have also just released Sharon Squassoni's study on the prospects of a nuclear power renaissance, which attempts to identify the key steps that would need to be taken to ensure that such a rebirth does not lead to proliferation. It, too, is available outside. All of these issues will, of course, come to head next year at the NPT Review Conference in May. The track record of recent NPT Review Conferences suggests that we should keep our expectations under a pretty strict curb rein. The common practice, but not, I should add, the rules by which the conference operates enable one country to block all the rest. And so, among other things, this means that states that are currently not complying with their obligations, such as Iran and Syria, can block any result from the conference. This is a silly situation that governments should look to correct. But nonetheless, I think we have to expect that intellectual breakthroughs in developing ideas about moving ahead are going to need to come both before and after the NPT Review Conference. And this offers those of us gathered here an additional opportunity and a challenge. If official forums cannot produce the rigorous give and take on the issues that confront us, then motivated people will have to find other ways to make this happen. And our event today and tomorrow is just such an opportunity for hard work, for considered debate, and perhaps, I hope, for some creative problem solving. We have gone to some lengths to ensure that this group includes people who disagree with each other, because singing to the choir is not something that will lead us forward. It is an important time. The risks of breakdown in the regime are real. There is no lack of ideas and energy and reason for hope, but there certainly is a daunting task ahead of us. Before I close, I want to personally thank the funders who make our work in this field possible, and therefore this gathering. They are the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Ford Foundation, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Norway, the New Land Foundation, the Plowshares Fund, the Prospect Hill Foundation, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. I hope you will join me in thanking them for their commitment to these issues, which means everything to all of us. Thank you. So now I wish you good conferencing, and I will turn the podium over to George Perkovich.